Well, we're in the same places we were last year at this time. I mean, go back and look at what some of you wrote last year and see how we ended up, right? We have a lot of time to make moves. A lot of these players that we lost, excellent players, a lot of these guys were acquired in August, right? Some of these guys were acquired in September. So, we're still building, and a big part of that is going to be through the draft, which is why we're all here today. But there's a lot of different opportunities along the way to add players. We've traded for players. We've drafted players. We signed guys as unrestricted free agents. We signed guys, street players who have made it. We've worked guys out. George Kokinis and Mark Acevedo do a phenomenal job of bringing players in. Our coaches do a great job working guys out, giving us a chance to find guys like, I'll mention them again, Ronald Darby, those type of players, Arthur Millette, players like that. So I think we're just really getting started, and a big part of that is certainly going to be the draft. But the destination is September, not May.
Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh have done a really good job so far this offseason building the team and continuing to get better, right? And I know it hurts losing Gus Edwards to the Chargers, losing J.K. Dobbins to free agency. It looks like he could sign elsewhere, but who knows, maybe he does end up back. But at the end of the day, when you look at the moves that they've made, they haven't overspent, and they brought in guys that can contribute on day one. I mean, starting off with Derrick Henry. In this video, we're going to break down everything you need to know about who they brought in so far this offseason, but more importantly, what their plan is going forward. The Ravens are putting together, a nasty blueprint for the NFL draft, and we sit back and we think about where the Ravens are their best, and that is during the NFL draft. They bring in studs. They bring in guys that will be impactful players. I mean, you look at last season, right? Trenton Simpson. He is a guy coming over here, the third-round pick of last season, who will be a day-one starter, a replacement for, Patrick Queen, and might even be a Pro Bowler next year. Guys, I am really excited for what the Ravens are about to do next, and we really have to pay attention because this draft is going to be insane. But before we get into the draft, let's talk a little bit more about some of these free agent signings that are going under the radar. Before we do that, though, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. It is free. Join the family, more Ravens videos for the rest of the season. Let's jump right into the video. Now, the first thing we need to talk about here is where the Ravens ranked last season in terms of offense, right? Number 4 in points per game, but also number 11 in third down conversion, number 2 in fourth down conversion, number 6 in touchdowns per game. But really what stands out to me is where they ranked in the rushing game. Number 3 in yards per carry, number 4 in rushing touchdowns per game, number 1 in rushing yards per game. This running attack was the best in football. And now you had a guy in Derrick Henry who will just make this even better. Now, luckily for Baltimore, the Dallas Cowboys never hit up Derrick Henry, and there was a point in time where Derrick Henry said, hey, I want to go to the Dallas Cowboys, but they obviously didn't want him, which was very surprising. But either way, the Baltimore Ravens end up getting a running back here who is a absolute dog, an absolute animal, over, 9,500 yards in his career, 4.7 yards per carry, 90 touchdowns. I mean, since 2018, he hasn't had a season less than 10, less than 10 rushing touchdowns. But also, he's been relatively productive in the passing game as well. Back in 2022, about 400 yards in the air as well, right? So not only can he run the football, and not only can he get those hard-fought yards, but he can also be a little bit reliable in the passing game as well, which is very important when it comes to, unpredictability, especially here in Baltimore. You cannot be so predictable. Obviously, they are the best rushing team in football, and that's what they're going to continue to do with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Another big thing to look at as well is the Ravens last year weren't amazing in terms of converting on third downs. However, Derrick Henry was number 2 in the NFL last year in first downs on rush attempts, right? But also, when you look at Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, they both ranked number 2. They were tied second overall over the last 2 years in terms of 10-plus yard rushes, and now they're both in the Ravens backfield. All right, real quickly, I want to talk about Deontay Hardy. They just signed him, I believe, 2 days ago. But before we get into that, do me a big favor and comment down below a letter grade for the Ravens so far this offseason. What do you think they need to do in this NFL draft? Because we will be talking at the end of the video a couple of draft prospects I think they're going to draft, right? So before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about Deontay Hardy. Hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. More Ravens videos all year long. Let's jump right back into Deontay Hardy. Now, another man they brought in was wide receiver return man Deontay Hardy. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but the kickoff rules are changed. Deontay Hardy becomes a very valuable asset in the NFL. You're going to start to see a lot more kick returns. You're going to start to see a lot more touchdowns. And there's going to be a lot more special teams being played and a lot more chunk plays on special teams, right? Now, one of the most important positions is return man. I guarantee you guys right now, you are going to see Deontay Hardy return a couple of touchdowns this year on kick return. And you're going to be like, oh, okay, so this is why we brought him in. Yeah. But with that being said, he's not a guy that's going to come in here and be a day one starter at wide receiver, right? You have Nelson Aguilar, you have Rashad Bateman, you have Zay Flowers, and I guarantee you they probably bring in a receiver during the NFL draft as well. But Deontay Hardy not only can give you a nice little speedy slot receiver, not only an ace on special teams that can make big time plays, but also is a guy that you can trust with the football in his hands, and at the end of the day, is a very solid route runner as well. So I think he's a guy that brings versatility, a guy that brings a new dynamic in terms of, you know, special teams, wide receiver. Look at this catch here, right? It's a stop for it, but man, what a catch. Nice adjustment in the air. I love Deontay Hardy. I love the signing, getting him pretty much for the veteran minimum, right? But at the same time, I think he will be very productive. And I think Ravens fans are going to slowly start to fall in love with what he's going to bring to this team, not only on the offensive side, but more importantly on special teams now that is becoming a prominent role in the NFL with the new kickoff return. Now, outside of Derrick Henry and Deontay Hardy, I don't think they made too many moves that are really going to move that needle on a specific position group. However, I really do like Josh Jones, a guy coming over from Houston. Might not be a day one starter, but adds a ton of leadership and a ton of depth here on this O-line that just really needs some more guys here. I think O-line will be a position they target in the NFL draft. But then you go to the defensive side of the football. They bring back Chris Board, who I believe was on this team for a while now, and I believe he's just coming back. You also bring in Kadar Holman, but more importantly, bringing back Kyle Van Noy on a 2-year deal could be very, very important, right? But I think where the Ravens do most of their great work is specifically in the NFL draft and what comes after the draft in terms of undrafted free agency and bringing in guys off the streets that end up being really good ball players, right? So at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is what they do next. And let's talk about what they should do next.
Definitely some players who can come in right away and probably compete to start for us. We would love to add a talented corner at some point in the draft, whether that's first round or second round, third round, whatever that might be, a talented player who can help us. That's a position, as you all know, that, you know, typically you never have enough due to injuries and different things. The guys will break down throughout the course of the season.
Now, I think right away, when we look at what the Ravens' history is and what they've done in past drafts, and adding cornerbacks is probably one of the most important things you can do, right? I mean, he said it right in that clip. It's so important to have depth here. And I think a guy from Alabama, Kool-Aid McKinstry, it doesn't make any more sense than him. He is the perfect Raven. He is the perfect fit, and maybe even a missing puzzle piece here with this Baltimore Ravens defense, who have lost some talent, but are still really, really good, right? I mean, when you look at some of his strengths here, or read a couple of them, but is definitely a guy who will come in and be a day one starter, very, very unique, and very just fits the system really well, right? Very smart football player, something you want, especially having a young guy who's only going to get better, communicates well, slides and rides or release to stall takeoff and timing the route. I think that's something you need in a corner. Does a nice job reading receivers' eyes, right? And the quarterback's eyes at time as well, especially when you're in zone. The Ravens like to run that man-to-man blitz style of defense. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry ran that a lot over there in Alabama. Possesses rapid acceleration to close quickly on throws. I think this is that's probably the most important one at all, right? When you're in those man-to-man press coverages, you need to be able to accelerate quickly to, break down the receiver, right? Get in between those the separation. I think that's going to be huge for them. Plays with poise and patience when tracking deep throws. Beautiful. Well-timed punches, claws, and chops, knocks away catch attempts. Again, this is literally the definition of a Baltimore Raven. And he's also could be a punt returner as well alongside Deontay Hardy. If they go with a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry in the first round, I think they're going to get a stud. And what you see here will eventually be a plus starter, maybe even a Pro Bowler at 5'11", coming out of Alabama. This could be a dream fit for Baltimore, especially in round 1.
I think offensive line is pretty stacked across the board in most rounds. I think receiver is a really deep draft this year. Those would be two. I think, I mentioned running back. I think that you'll see a lot of running backs get drafted probably starting in the 3rd round. Through the 7th, you'll see a lot of guys get picked. Those would be positions that, when I look at assess the draft, I think are pretty deep positions in the draft this year.
I think outside of Kool-Aid McKinstry, they're going to target a couple of other positions. I think most importantly, offensive line. Definitely got to get more depth at the offensive line position, the wide receiver position, and maybe even the running back position as well. I think they could go, heavy offense here later in the draft. They do such a good job building defensively, right, in what they're trying to do in that aspect. But offensively, definitely need to add some more depth here. I mean, drafting a running back with Derrick Henry getting up there in age is probably the smart thing to do, but I wouldn't do it until the 3rd, 4th, maybe even the 5th round as well. In the 2nd, 3rd rounds, I would go offensive lineman, maybe bring a wide receiver in one of those 2 rounds as well. I think the Ravens are setting up a strategy where you can't really go wrong, right? I feel like the class is deep in terms of wide receiver and O-line. You got to go cornerback early and then load up on some other positions later in the draft. But the Ravens do such a good job finding those hidden gems. And ultimately, I think that's what they'll do this time around. Now, if you guys want a more in-depth draft prediction or a draft strategy video, I will break down like 5 players from this year's draft that I think would be perfect fits here in Baltimore. If you guys want to see that, let me know down in the comment section down below by saying, part 2. If you guys want part 2, let me know in the comments down below. Hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and also comment down below the number 1 if you guys made it this far into the video. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next Ravens update. Hopefully it's soon if you guys want to see it. Peace.